Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonwa and you're watching A News. Let's see the top stories. Japanese stocks surged to record high as Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi wins a landslide election victory. Hong Kong court jails media tycoon Jimmy Lai for 20 years. And 9 people killed and several injured after building collapse in Lebanon. Japan stocks have surged to a record high after a snap election produced a landslide win for Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's Liberal Democratic Party, won 316 of 465 seats on Sunday. The result has implications for her economic policy, financial markets, and Japan's security posture. Here is more.
Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi coalition has won an historic landslide in Sunday's snap election, securing one of the strongest mandates in the country's post-war history. She delivered 316 seats of the 465 in Parliament's lower house for her Liberal Democratic Party, its best ever result. The win gives the party about 68% of the chamber. It is the first time a single party has achieved a two-thirds majority in Japan's lower house. Japanese media have described the result as an historic victory. The victory paves the way for promised tax cuts that have spooked financial markets and military spending aimed at countering China, a strong stance that has strained ties with her powerful neighbour. However, the main concerns with voters are rising living costs and sluggish economic growth.
I do support the Liberal Democratic Party, but I do have some concerns about them winning too much. For the government going forward, I hope they tighten their discipline, don't get complacent, and run the administration without any looseness.
I think it's a good thing that people who value Japan were elected. Her popularity was part of it.
Takaichi became Prime Minister in October after taking over leadership of the LDP, becoming the first female leader in the country. She called the snap vote to seek a clear mandate after the party lost its parliamentary majority under her predecessors. Financial markets reacted sharply to the result. Japanese stocks surged to record highs, while government bonds fell. The Nikkei 225 rose as much as 4.2% during trading, hitting an all-time high. The broader Topix index also climbed to a record level.
A Hong Kong court has sentenced prominent media tycoon Jimmy Lai to 20 years in prison. This is the harshest sentence to be given under the controversial national security law, which China says is necessary for the city's stability.
Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to a total of 20 years in jail on 3 charges. These comprise of 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and 1 count of publishing seditious materials. The 78-year-old self-made billionaire is among the highest-profile government critics to be charged since Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law on the semi-autonomous southern city in 2020. He was first arrested in August that year. Lai, also a British citizen and founder of the now-closed Apple Daily newspaper, was convicted on the 15th of December last year on all 3 counts. He denies all charges. He told the court he is a political prisoner facing persecution from Beijing. The sentence is likely to galvanise international calls for the media mogul's release in a landmark trial closely watched by Western leaders, including US President Donald Trump, who previously vowed to get him out. Supporters of the Hong Kong democracy activist queued outside the court in hopes of catching a last glimpse of Lai as he arrived for sentencing.
I started queuing at 8 p.m. last Thursday. I just wish to greet Mr. Lai in person in court. That's all I ask for because I think it will be the last time I see him.
2 years of Lai's sentence will overlap with his existing prison term, meaning he will serve an additional 18 years. However, he will not be eligible for parole until he is in his late 90s. Both Beijing and Hong Kong's government have repeatedly rejected international criticism of Lai's prosecution and dismissed accusations that his jailing was politically motivated.
Over to Lebanon, where a multi-story apartment building collapsed on Sunday in the northern city of Tripoli, killing at least half a dozen people. The incident has raised concerns about unsafe housing in the area. Rescue teams continue to work at the site, with authorities warning that many buildings remain at risk.
Rescue teams continue to search for 8 people believed to be missing after a multi-story apartment building collapsed in the northern Lebanese city of Tripoli on Sunday. At least 9 people have been killed and dozens injured. 6 people have been rescued from the rubble so far. Civil Defense Director General Imad Kreish said the building was made up of 2 blocks, each containing 6 apartments. He said 22 people were inside at the time of the collapse. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun ordered all emergency services to remain on high alert. He also instructed authorities to provide shelter for residents of nearby buildings. The collapse comes just weeks after another deadly building disaster in Tripoli. In January, the head of the Higher Relief Authority, Bassam Nablusi, said Tripoli municipality records showed that 105 buildings needed immediate evacuation warnings. Lebanon has many derelict buildings, with some occupied structures in serious disrepair. Many were built illegally during the 1975 to 1990 civil war, while others had extra floors added without permits.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will travel to Washington, D.C. this week for talks with U.S. President Donald Trump focused on Iran, his office said. The meeting is scheduled for Wednesday and comes as the United States and Iran held 2 rounds of indirect talks in Oman on Friday. Netanyahu's office said any agreement must include limits on Iran's ballistic missile program and an end to Tehran's support for regional armed groups. The White House has not commented on the meeting yet.
Say Iran is so weak. I appreciate you saying that. They're not weak.
World leaders and senior officials are gathering in Germany this week for the Munich Security Conference. A large U.S. delegation led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to play a big role.
The Munich Security Conference opens this week from Friday to Sunday, bringing together world leaders, ministers, and senior security officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to attend, with the war in Ukraine again high on the agenda. 15 European Union prime ministers and heads of state are due to attend, and Germany's chancellor will open the conference. Delegations are also expected from across the Middle East, Latin America, and Asia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to lead a large American delegation.
In my view, transatlantic relations are currently experiencing a significant crisis of confidence and credibility. That is why it is particularly gratifying that the American side is taking such a keen interest in Munich. I expect well over 50 members of the American Congress and an impressive delegation from the American government, led, according to the latest information, by Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Rubio is expected to address the conference on Saturday, with organizers saying they anticipate a focus on U.S. foreign policy rather than domestic European issues. One of the central themes of the conference will be Europe's ability to act more decisively through its own capabilities and to speak with a single voice. Organizers point to Europe's recent response to U.S. pressure over Greenland and trade as an example of how the bloc can assert itself when required.
NATO's biggest military drill of 2026 is now in progress. This year's Steadfast Dart exercise involves about 10,000 troops from 11 NATO countries, including Germany, Italy, France, the United Kingdom and Spain. Turkey, which has the alliance's second largest military after the United States, has contributed military aircraft, along with roughly 2,000 troops. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
The Turkish armed forces have dispatched military aircraft and around 2,000 troops to Germany to take part in NATO's largest annual exercise. The drills, dubbed Steadfast Dart 2026, began on Sunday and will continue for 12 days until February 20th, under the direction of NATO's Joint Force Command. On Saturday, the Turkish Defense Ministry said its military aircraft had departed from Turkey's Çorlu province and arrived at Germany's Wunstorf air base to participate in the exercise. The deployment marks the first time Turkey has sent such a large military force to Northern Europe, highlighting the country's growing role within NATO's defense architecture. Speaking to reporters last week, a spokesman for the Turkish Defense Ministry said the deployment demonstrates the strength and readiness of the Turkish armed forces within the Western alliance. This year's Steadfast Dart exercise brings together around 10,000 troops from 11 NATO member states, including Germany, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, and Spain. More than 1,500 military vehicles, 30 fighter aircraft, 15 helicopters, and 15 warships are taking part in the drills. The exercise is designed to test NATO's rapid reaction capabilities in the event of a crisis in Europe and to enhance interoperability among allied forces. Turkey has been a member of NATO since 1952 and currently fields the second largest military in the 32-member alliance after the United States. This is Adam Mara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Over in Portugal, 11 million people were eligible to cast their ballots in the presidential election. The vote ended with a clear victory for socialist candidate Antonio José Seguro, who defeated the far-right challenger in the second round.
Antonio José Seguro of the centre-left Socialist Party won the second round of the presidential election in Portugal on Sunday. With 99% of ballots counted, Seguro had won 66.7% of votes to secure a 5-year term. The 63-year-old cast himself as the candidate of a modern and moderate left who can actively mediate to avert political crises and defend democratic values.
As I have said many times, as a Democrat, all those who ran against me in this election process deserve my respect. As future President of the Republic, I would add that as of tonight, we are no longer opponents and now have a shared duty to work towards a more developed and fairer Portugal.
Seguro saw off a challenge from the far-right populist Chega Party's André Ventura, who won 33.3% of the vote. Despite his loss, André Ventura said on Sunday that his anti-establishment movement is on its way to victory.
With a great part of our country, Europe and the world against us, with Brussels against us, with everyone against us, we got the best result ever. We did not win, but we are on our way to victory.
Este movimento, este partido, esta força.
In Portugal, the new president will succeed outgoing Conservative Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa in early March. Portugal's presidency is a largely ceremonial role, but holds some key powers, including the ability to dissolve parliament and block legislation under certain circumstances.
Spain's largest train drivers' union has begun a 3-day nationwide strike, disrupting rail services across the country. The action follows a series of deadly rail incidents in January that have reignited concerns over safety and infrastructure investment. Passengers across Spain are facing delays and cancellations as authorities enforce reduced service levels during the walkout.
Spain's largest train drivers' union has launched a 3-day nationwide strike, disrupting rail services as workers demand stronger safety measures. The walkout follows 4 rail incidents in January, including 3 derailments in 48 hours, which killed dozens of people, including drivers. A preliminary report on the Ademuz high-speed train crash, which killed 46, indicated a track fracture may have caused the derailment. Hours later, a commuter train near Barcelona derailed after a retaining wall collapsed, killing the driver and injuring 4 passengers. Union representatives blame years of underinvestment in rail maintenance. CEMAF says it warned infrastructure operator Adif months earlier about track wear and structural defects.
The situation is dire. We can't come to work with fear in our blood, with that knot in our stomachs thinking this is going to continue. This is a demand for total safety.
Spain's Transport Ministry has imposed minimum service levels, keeping long-distance routes at just over 70% capacity, with reduced commuter services. Passengers face ongoing delays as pressure mounts on authorities to improve rail safety.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Benjamin Netanyahu's upcoming Washington visit and the US-Iran nuclear talks. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is flying to Washington, D.C. this week for another high-stakes meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump amid a renewed U.S.-Iran diplomatic push. The discussions will come as indirect U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations held in Oman have so far failed to bridge key differences, with Tehran insisting talks stay focused on its nuclear program, while Washington and Israel want broader talks to include ballistic missiles and Iran's support for regional armed groups. Netanyahu believes any deal must compel Tehran to curb its missile program and hold backing for Hezbollah and Hamas and other proxies, a position Tehran has firmly rejected as non-negotiable. The region watches nervously as diplomatic engagements and military posturing continue alongside warnings from Gulf states about the risk of wider conflict. Our guest today is Maurice Hirsch from the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, joining us live from Jerusalem. Mr. Hirsch, welcome to the program.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. So, Mr. Hirsch, what's the core objective of Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting with Donald Trump this week? How is it different from past meetings?
So I think that there are two possibly major goals for Prime Minister Netanyahu in Washington this week. Firstly is to coordinate whatever is going forward on the Iranian front, to see exactly how the talks should be framed, can they be framed, should the scope be given to Iran to again lead the world down this path of unfulfilled promises? Should they be given a clear directive, a clear ultimatum? This is what needs to be done, and this is the deadline that we expect to see dismantling the program entirely, dismantling entirely the production of the ballistic weapons and disarmament, and similarly defunding all of the terror proxies. These are the three elements that are critical moving forward for security, not only Israel's security. The ballistic missiles threaten and have been used not only against Israel, and therefore they are on whether the Iranians like that or not. Second goal of is to discuss what's happening in the peace moving forward in Gaza. We're seeing repeated statements by the leaders of Hamas that they're refusing to what they agreed to previously. They're refusing to disarm. They are refusing to relinquish any governance position in the Gaza Strip. And these two subjects are key subjects for the entire security of the Middle East, which do require this face-to-face interaction, I think, between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump.
Mr. Hirsch, Iran's delegation has said that ballistic missiles are non-negotiable. From Tehran's perspective, why is this a red line?
Well, for Tehran, really giving up on its nuclear program is possibly a somewhat moot question after the attack last June. It's something that they haven't really managed to re-establish and to rehabilitate in the meantime. So they're happy to possibly talk about restrictions being placed on that development, in the knowledge that nothing really substantial is going on there in the next, or at least in the foreseeable future. On the subject of the ballistic missiles, it's their red line, because since June last year, they have gone into an upward grade production of the ballistic missiles of all of the different ranges, and that's something which they've invested time, energy, and critical financial resources, while Iran is basically drying up, suffering its worst drought in recorded history. The Iranian regime is spending more and more money on developing and producing ballistic missiles. They cannot now say that we're just going to end all of that production and then tell the Iranian people, we murdered you in the streets for no reason whatsoever. We're not going to provide you with a solution for the water conflict. We're not going to provide you for a solution for the financial problems. And yet we're also now going to suddenly stop our ballistic missile production. I think the Iranians know that they've made the wrong decision until now. And unfortunately, they are incapable of understanding that this is possibly their last option that remains on the table before decisive action is taken against them.
So President Donald Trump called the Oman talks very good, yet no breakthrough emerged. How should we interpret that optimism amid deep disagreements?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So I'm asking again, the President Donald Trump said that the Oman talks are very good and are very positive, but no breakthrough has emerged. How can we say that it's very good or not?
So I think President Trump is trying to reach an agreement that will avoid military interaction, that it will avoid this almost inevitable now conflict. And I think he's trying to frame it in terms of positivity moving forward. I think it's part of the game plan of President Trump to show that he is open, that he is willing, that he actually wants to get to a political solution rather than going down the military path. And he's willing to see even small movement by the Iranians as something which is positive. Now, I don't think we should be misled by the public announcements of the Iranian regime behind closed doors. They know that they are in trouble. The Iranian leadership has, as we know, taken steps to send money out of the country. They are avoiding public appearances. They have implemented much more stringent security restrictions than ever before. This is something we don't do when you feel that you're coming from a position of strength. And that weakness, that understanding of the Iranian position is, I think, something which President Trump is trying to leverage, projecting positivity rather than saying, well, you seem to be running only to the military solution, which he is not.
Mr. Hirsch, how are Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Oman influencing or responding to the US-Iran dialogue? And what role can regional diplomacy play in preventing escalation?
So I think there are different approaches of the different countries. I think many of the Gulf countries would like to see Iran isolated as it is, subject to international sanctions, rather than being opened up, getting rid of the axis of evil and the terror regime, and then have the access and free access now, all of the Iranian oil. I think that's something which is a critical factor as part of any of these discussions. I think that the Gulf countries that see positivity, that see progress for the region away from this Iranian axis of evil, are willing to even possibly participate and in the effort to ensure that the Iranian regime is changed, whilst others would prefer to see Iran as it is, but weakened, staying in that very compromised situation, not necessarily for the best of the Iranian people, but for the best of their own economy's interests.
So in your view, how does the domestic political climate in Tehran, including recent protests and leadership dynamics, affect Iran's negotiating position?
Well, I think that obviously when you're having to deal with mass demonstrations at home, when you know that you don't have the support of the people going forward for the policies that you are presenting outwardly in the face of a potential war, when you have to divide your force between defending against a military attack, but at the same time controlling and killing, as it were, the Iranians on the streets, then that's something which obviously divides their attention and really divides their force. That's not something which the Iranian regime can ignore. It's something which they must take into account, that whilst they are trying to project this violence outwardly, at home they are to insurrection, they are subject to the will of the people to to change the regime, to get rid of this regime, and to find a better solution. Economically, Iran, we know, is collapsing. And that is because of the regime, that is because of the sanctions, and that's something which could change almost immediately for the better of the future of the Iranian people. So that is something which obviously does play into these negotiations.
Mr. Hirsch, let's assume that Netanyahu and Trump agree on a unified strategy. What might be the next phase of diplomacy look like, and how might Iran respond?
So I think the next stage of diplomacy would be to say to Iran, we have heard your arguments, we have seen and exposed your negotiating tactics. We are setting a deadline for the end of these talks. Either you come to an agreement on all of the different subjects that President Trump has put onto the table, and if not, then we will have to consider other options. Those other options would obviously be a military option. I think it would possibly include, whilst most people focus only on the US and potentially Israel as part of that effort, I think there would be other regional partners participating in that type of a coordinated action, some less openly, less publicly than others. I think that will be gauged based on the perceived success of the operation. And as the operation, I think, develops and is perceived to be a greater success and is getting closer towards removing the regime of the Ayatollahs, I think we'll see more regional partners openly participating in this effort, in the understanding that there will be no detrimental consequences from that. And so that, I think, will be the next steps going forward.
Maurice Hirsch, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights on these delicate and hugely consequential developments. We truly appreciate your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region.
Welcome to Shusha. That spring water comes from the Karabakh Mountains. I'd love to taste it, actually. That is just amazing. All right, we're in the kitchen here with Etzi Bar. He's the head chef. What are we making today?
Today we will be preparing Shusha rice.
Finally doing something. Etzi Bar, come on. 5 more minutes and we'll be eating. Hopefully we can get down there. 4 hours in here, that's been cooking. That is amazing.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Pakistan has reportedly decided to send back nearly 20,000 Afghan refugees who are waiting for resettlement in the United States. Pakistani media say the Federal Interior Ministry is preparing formal instructions to provincial authorities to begin the process. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
According to Pakistani local media, Islamabad plans to return around 20,000 Afghan nationals who are currently awaiting relocation to the United States. Sources say the Federal Interior Ministry has decided to send letters to all provincial chief secretaries, police chiefs and authorities in Islamabad, instructing them to initiate the return of Afghan citizens. Thousands of Afghans in Pakistan have been waiting for years to be resettled in the United States after being evacuated from Afghanistan in 2021. Many of them had worked with US forces or institutions and feared retaliation after the Taliban returned to power. However, reports suggest that Washington is being slow or unwilling to accept many of those still waiting, leaving them in prolonged uncertainty. Pakistani authorities are now expected to begin the process of sending these Afghans back to Afghanistan. The development comes as arrests of Afghan nationals continue across Pakistan. A joint report by the International Organization for Migration and the UN Refugee Agency say more than 7,000 Afghans were detained in the past month alone, most of them lacking valid residency documents. In January alone, Pakistani authorities detained around 6,200 undocumented migrants and 740 registered refugees. The latest move is likely to deepen concerns among Afghans in Pakistan who are still waiting for resettlement abroad, as uncertainty over their future continues to grow. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Saudi Arabia has opened the third World Defense Show near Riyadh, bringing together global defense companies as the kingdom pushes to expand local production and strengthen strategic independence in its defense industry. Our Nuray Mustafa has more from Riyadh.
The third World Defense Show opened on 8 February by Prince Khalid bin Salman, Saudi Arabia's Minister of Defense, in Mulham, north of Riyadh. The 5-day event features international and regional defense companies and aims to strengthen localization and strategic independence in the kingdom's defense industry. World Defense Show CEO Andrew Piercy highlighted that the exhibition includes a fully equipped airport, a 2,700-meter runway, taxiway and large display areas for the latest aircraft, showcasing its world-class capabilities. On the first day, GAMI signed agreement with SAMI, General Electric and Airbus Defence and Space to boost localization and technology transfer. In aviation, GE Aerospace and Middle East Propulsion Company announced 3 deals to improve the Royal Saudi Air Force's F-110-129 engines. Aerobatic and formation highlights by the Air Force were also presented. The show demonstrates Saudi Arabia's commitment to innovation, localization, and integrated defense ecosystem, featuring live demonstrations, static display, and new zones to foster collaboration between government bodies and defense companies. Nuray Mustafa and Zohrab Shirinov for A News, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is set to begin a 3-day visit to Azerbaijan and Armenia. Vance arrived in Yerevan on Monday before proceeding to Baku on Tuesday. The trip is aimed at promoting the U.S. administration's peace efforts, as well as the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity project. Vance will be joined by U.S. Under-Secretary of State for Economic Growth Jacob Helberg. Azerbaijani civil society representatives have sent an open letter to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, calling for support on religious freedom and a right of return for Azerbaijanis displaced from Armenia. The letter highlights Azerbaijan's record of interfaith coexistence and urges the U.S. backing for the peaceful return of Western Azerbaijanis and the protection of cultural and religious heritage. The appeal also references the August 2025 Washington Joint Declaration, supporting efforts by Azerbaijan and the United States to advance a lasting regional peace.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has met with a delegation from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Baku. The delegation was led by Kurush Choksi, Senior Vice President for International Member Relations and the Middle East and Turkey, and included senior executives from major U.S. and international companies spanning technology, energy, finance, aviation, and manufacturing. Georgia's Prime Minister says most of the country's main east-west highway is expected to be completed by the end of 2030. The project is a key part of efforts to improve transport links and make Georgia a vital route for trade between Asia and Europe. Our correspondent Nini Nikolaishvili has more from Tbilisi.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze says the government is taking what he described as consistent steps to fully utilize the country's strategic location, with a particular focus on developing transport and transit infrastructure. Speaking to the journalists, Kobakhidze said strengthening connectivity is one of the government's key priorities, as Georgia positions itself as a critical link in regional and international trade routes. According to the Prime Minister, large-scale investments are currently underway in infrastructure projects tied to the East-West Highway, which forms Georgia's section of the so-called Middle Corridor, a multimodal trade route connecting Asia with Europe via the South Caucasus and the Black Sea. Kobakhidze said that under current plans, nearly all sections of the East-West Highway will be completed by the end of 2030. The highway will run continuously from Georgia's border with Turkey through to the borders with Azerbaijan and Armenia, significantly improving cross-border transport capacity. The East-West Highway, also known as the European Transit Route E60, stretches approximately 392 kilometers across Georgia. It begins at the Red Bridge on the Azerbaijani border and ends on the Black Sea coast near the port city of Poti, one of Georgia's main maritime gateways. Once fully completed, travel time across the country from Sarpi on the Turkish border to the Red Bridge is expected to be reduced from around 8 hours to approximately 4 to 4.5 hours. Officials say that this reduction will improve the efficiency of cargo movement and lower transportation costs for regional and international trade. The Middle Corridor has gained increased attention in recent years as an alternative trade route between Asia and Europe, particularly amid disruptions to traditional northern routes. Georgia's location places it at the center of this corridor, linking Central Asia and the South Caucasus to the Black Sea ports and onwards to the European markets. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Kazakhstan has unveiled plans for what it calls the first crypto city in Central Asia, part of a broader effort to develop new digital and investment infrastructure. The project is set to be built in a newly established city of Alatau. Our correspondent reports from Almaty.
Kazakhstan plans to establish the first so-called crypto city in Central Asia, a designated zone for operations involving digital assets. The project is being developed with the participation of a Chinese construction company and forms part of a broader plan to build new urban infrastructure. The crypto city will be located in Alatau, a newly established city in southeastern Kazakhstan. It sits along the Almaty-Konaev highway and is linked to the Western Europe-Western China transport corridor. Authorities intend to use the area as an economic and logistics platform. The investment portfolio of Alatau city includes 44 projects with a total value of around $4 billion. They span industry, logistics, agri-processing, services and creative sectors. Among the planned developments are the multifunctional iconic complex, intended as the city's business core, and the technology university focused on workforce training and applied research. A special legal framework is being prepared for the city. A draft constitutional law on the special status of Alatau is currently under review in Parliament. It provides for the creation of a free economic zone, visa-free access for foreign visitors, and unrestricted property purchases across an area of roughly 880 square kilometers. Digital assets are expected to be usable for payments within the designated zone. At the same time, regulators stress that the tenge will remain the country's only legal tender, with crypto payments processed through conversion into fiat currency. And according to the Minister of National Economy, if all planned projects are implemented, Alatau could generate up to $40 billion for the country over the next 30 years. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Georgia's push to become a key transit hub through the East-West Highway and the Middle Corridor. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Now we turn our focus to Georgia, a country at the crossroads of Europe and Asia that is rapidly transforming itself into a major regional transit hub and logistics hub. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze has announced that all segments of the country's East-West Highway will be completed by the end of 2030, connecting the Turkish border in the west all the way to Azerbaijan and Armenia in the east. The project is a centerpiece of Georgia's broader strategy to leverage its strategic geography and strengthen its role in the Middle Corridor, an alternative trade and transport route linking Asia and Europe. With cargo volumes rising across the region and infrastructure financing flowing from international partners, Georgia is positioning itself as a vital connector in global supply chains. But challenges remain. Today we explore this transformation with our guest, Dr. Vakhtang Maysaya, a political analyst based in Tbilisi, Georgia. Mr. Maysaya, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I would like to greet you.
Thanks a lot. So, Mr. Maysaya, Prime Minister Kobakhidze has said that Georgia will complete all major sections of the East-West Highway by 2030. What will this mean for Georgia's position within the Middle Corridor and global transport networks?
Well, first of all, it will be great achievements for the expansion of the Middle Corridor. And of course, it will be just about interconnection of the two main regions. I mean, about Caucasus and Central Asia. I mean, just about mainly more South Caucasus with Central Asia. And second and third, for Georgia, it will be just about good positions to get about international transit hub status, not regional hub, but international transit hub status, which also just will be good indications from promotion Georgian economic growth. I mean, the growth GDP, just GNP, and of course attract more additional just about foreign direct investments. And second, and for the fifth, I will mention that from Georgia perspective, it should be just about more expand, not only to the south, but even to the west directions, and even just about Georgian seaport should be just developed. And at last, I guess this project, which foreseen to be realized into 2030, I guess at last will just about launch just implementation of the Anaklia Seaport project initiative, which also most important from Georgian perspective. So I guess it's like just domain perspective, which Georgia just perceive by 2030. Second, additional, they'll mention that Georgians just about European integration trends should be just reacted or just about renovated. And of course, you know, just a time of being, Georgia's about, unfortunately, just about suspended its European integration by 2028. And I guess that when this logistical, just about most important project will be just done and accomplished, I guess by 2030, Georgia will just be reactivate and renovate its integration trend with European Union. And of course, with these international possible hub status provisions, should also have a good chance to become as a European family member country. State country. State member.
The East-West Highway has been under construction for years. Can you briefly explain the current status of the project and where the biggest challenges still lie?
Well, it's just about this project linked with about realization of the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway, which unfortunately still just about faces some financial economic challenges and problems. It's like just about some like just misunderstandings between these involved parties and corporate and of course companies, which also just developing this and develop this project. I mean about Baku-Tbilisi cars. But as I know, just about 2025, the just about trilateral commission with involvement of the Turkey, Georgia, and Azerbaijani governmental, just about proper, just about structured representatives, also just about made a good deal about to overcome all the problems. That's why this Georgian Prime Minister mentioned that whilst all the problems been overcome, I guess this project could have enhanced perspective to develop from the technical economic, just about, technical economic calculation stage to the real constructions stage provisions. I guess it's also just have about 3 or 4 stages, whilst it will be completed at the end. And nowadays, as I just about, according to my information, involved countries, I mean about Turkey, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, they also stepped into the second stage of development of this just about important logistics project. I mean about Baku-Tbilisi cars, which also linked to this about East-West transit large corridor promotional project development.
So how do international financial partners like the Asian Development Bank and the European Investment Bank view Georgia's infrastructure push? And how crucial is their support?
Well, this is very crucial. I guess at this third stage of this development of the project, I guess these two financial giants will join and, of course, will increase just about financial support to promote this project on its way. Moreover, it also just indicated that about just geoeconomic links between the European Union and China will be also just boomed and also just been increased quite steadily. And of course, it's also just give good implications from transforming simply from geoeconomic realization project into a geostrategic realization project one. And of course, it's make possible just to make a more close political ties between the Brussels and Beijing, and of course to make at least about geopolitical trend between European Union and China. I think so that it's also just should be considered that it's also just have like a good implications to also expand realization and also speed up realization of the so-called Trump or Zangezur corridor development, because all two transit routes will be just connected and all just enrolled into the Turkish territory. I guess in that level, Turkey also have a good chance that Turkey will becoming also just about global level transit hub. And of course, it's also just will be beneficial for the Azerbaijani national economic interest perspective.
Mr. Maysaia, it's clear that critics sometimes raise concerns about environmental or social impacts of large infrastructure projects. How is the Georgian government addressing these issues?
No, it's this, initially the Baku-Tbilisi cars railway just project also just included and perceived just environment security protection measures and means. That's why the projects have been protected, unfortunately, and been realized to just develop and launch at this stage. So I think so. This is a quite, safe from ecological, environmental security perspective project. Absolutely, we can be sure about it. And moreover, it's also had like a more social just about development ties, which also now at the globalization period of time, environment security and social security interpreted and intervened to each other. And of course, I guess the both elements, environmental protection and social protection, will be the most important implications with the project will become to the end.
So in your view, to what extent does the Middle Corridor offer a competitive alternative to traditional maritime routes such as the Suez Canal?
Well, it's about land. First of all, it's a global land corridor, which is absolutely quite different with the maritime, just about corridor cases, because, China's Belt and Road Initiative has like two important just about wings or offshore or just about wings. It's about just maritime and land. So I guess the realization of the project will increase about land corridor, just about domain compared to the maritime, just about project realization, because it will be more shortened, more efficient, and less expensive by its own origin. I guess just about China and European Union will just put their stake on development of the land corridor, traditional just about just upstreams, and also develop this strength rather than compare with the maritime, because maritime just transit routes also faces some other just about more geostrategic military, just challenges about it. Pirates, it's about just terrorist attacks, also just about hurricanes, and of course some environmental just about security challenges and risks also coincided. I guess the land transit corridor is more secure and more safe.
And finally, looking toward 2030 and beyond, what are the biggest geopolitical or economic hurdles that Georgia must navigate to fully capitalize on its transit potential?
Well, first of all, I just mentioned that the realization of the project also will good indications to revive Georgia's European Union integration trends. And of course, about it's also give a good just about fortune that Georgia will become at last the candidate members and will be granted a European candidacy status at last, and which also just get us to the full membership to the European Union community. It's the most important one. It's just about a more geopolitical capitalization from Georgia perspective. Second, of course, it will be a good idea to have to create about to be as a bridge, real true bridge between the East and West, between the European Union and China. It's also just about, should be considered about good geopolitical implications. And third, of course, having considered about that in Georgia, Azerbaijan will develop more strategic cooperation, also increase about our regional stability peace, and also just give a good basics for promotion so-called Caucasus Geostrata idea about peace and stability land in the world politics.
Dr. Vakhtang Maysayev, thank you very much for talking to A News. We truly appreciate your expert perspective on these vital developments shaping Georgia's future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned to A News for more.